In northeastern Egypt, there's a 120-mile stretch of the Red Sea that separates Africa from the Sinai Peninsula. In addition to being one of the busiest shipping routes in the world, the Red Sea is also widely believed to be the site of a miracle that continues to capture our imagination.
Following the story of the Exodus, Moses successfully gets the Hebrews out of Egypt and they take off. But then the Pharaoh, in his anger and in the realization that he's lost his free labor, says, I change my mind, go get those guys. So now the Hebrews find themselves on the run with this massive body of water ahead of them, understood to be the Red Sea, and the Egyptian army behind them.
According to the Bible, as the Egyptian soldiers were closing in on the Israelites, Moses held out his staff across the waters, and God parted the Red Sea.
The Israelites are able to walk across the sea, and then Pharaoh's army comes rushing after them, and the sea closes in, collapses, kills them. And so the story gets resolved by Moses and the Israelites escaping through the miracle of God with the parting of the Red Sea.
Biblical scholars point to the parting of the Red Sea as a story that is meant to show that the power of God can bring salvation to those who are downtrodden.
The parting of the Red Sea, it's this amazing kind of story because it very much is this vengeful God who has this extraordinary power, saying, okay, here's the reward for the righteous. Moses and his people are able to get free. Here's the punishment for the wicked, Pharaoh and his army.
On the surface, the parting of the Red Sea may seem far-fetched compared to other acts of God that resemble natural occurrences, such as the Great Flood or the 10 plagues. But there are some researchers who believe that there is evidence to suggest that the literal parting of an enormous body of water is actually possible. And they claim a clue can be found in the way the Bible says God used his power to part the Red Sea.
The biblical account of the parting of the water is told in Exodus chapter 14, and there's two key verses. I will read them. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. So there's this detail in the account that says how the wind blew and the water shifted and the dry land emerged from the sea bottom.
But what was the mysterious wind that God used to part the Red Sea? Well, according to some scientists, it could have been an unusual weather phenomenon that is known as wind set-down.
When a strong wind blows on a body of water, the body of water shifts all the water in one direction. Now on one side, it's called storm surge because the waters are going to build up there. On the other side, the level drops, and that's called wind set down. Then when the wind stops, the waters come back again, just like the Bible says.
One theory is that Moses could have timed it. He knew when the next rush of water would come in, and the Egyptians would blindly walk into the trap and get flooded.
This kind of event happens only by hourly timing, and the Bible reports that God told Moses to be at this place and at this time and be ready for what's going to happen. So the mystery here is really in the timing.
Ellerslie, Georgia, March 3rd, 2019. After a long, hard week, the Kofelt family is looking forward to spending a Sunday relaxing in the comfort of their home. But it isn't long before they realize their plans are going to be interrupted.
We started getting all these notifications on our phones, like tornado warning, and then we started getting a little bit concerned, and we looked outside, So the weather's getting kind of bad.
It was like dark clouds. It's hard to describe because it was just like coming toward the house. It was getting really dark.
I started walking towards the door, and it just almost went pitch black. My wife yelled, "Go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom." All of us, my wife and 2 daughters, went in the bathroom. A minute or 2 went by, and you heard the tornado coming in. It started with a small whistle, and it got louder and louder, and then it kind of sounded like a train coming in, and it just hit the house.
When we were in there, it was so confusing because you didn't know what was going to happen, especially when we started hearing stuff happen around us, and you know, we're all just in that tight space, and I was screaming.
Everything just started shaking. You could hear the little snaps going on outside, and then it stopped. And then it happened again.
When the violent shaking finally subsides, the frightened family cautiously leaves the safety of the bathroom to assess the damage to their house. But to their shock and disbelief, there's none.
Came out, we walked out the front door and looked and saw everything. It was overwhelming. F4 tornado comes across and destroys everything around you, except for your house, and you and your family still standing. We were just completely overwhelmed. We could barely breathe, and I just couldn't believe the destruction that was all out there. It was just breathtaking. Like, it can't be explained. The emotions and the feelings that go through is really just, it's mind-blowing.
Despite sitting directly in the tornado's savage path, the Kofeld house was somehow spared when nearly everything else in sight was leveled. Aside from some minor superficial damage, barely a shingle had been knocked out of place. But how?
There are so many variables with a tornado and why it hits this house and not that one. It's really hard to say. There could be little pockets of pressure, little pockets of temperature, little pockets of moisture. Who knows what it is, but it could be little pockets that change the statistics of the debris field such that it just happens to miss that spot.
Tornadoes never travel in very straight, regular paths. When you picture the video, it's an interesting path to avoid the house, but you could imagine a tornado circling back on itself. That is not inconceivable. This house could have been lucky to have the tornado come down the right side, turn around, destroy the forest on the other side, turn around again, and then go off.
Could it be that the Kofelds and their house survived simply because of luck? Or was it the result of some kind of deliberate intervention? After all, from Zeus, the Greek god of thunder, to Set, the Egyptian god of storms, ancient cultures believed weather was not a random force of nature, but a power wielded by the gods.
On December 12th, 1799, Washington starts his day like he would almost any other. He goes out and inspects all of the outlying farms. While he's out, a rainstorm starts. Turns into sleet and to snow. When he returns that evening, his outer coat is pretty much soaked. He's advised by his secretary to change his clothes. Washington actually says, "No, I'm fine." He knows he's running late, and he has guests there. He doesn't want to keep them waiting for dinner. So instead of changing out his clothes, he goes and has a seat and he eats.
After entertaining his guests, Washington retires for the evening, but is awakened in the middle of the night with a violent and mysterious throat illness.
Around 3 or 4 in the morning, Washington awakes. He's coughing, he's shivering. Martha Washington insists on getting someone to come help them, but the worst thing someone could do to a sick person in the 18th century was call a doctor. They knew next to nothing, and so it never, ever improved the situation and killed many people.
When doctors arrived at Washington's Mount Vernon home, they performed strange treatments to battle his unknown illness. Treatments that, by today's standards, sound like torture.
This is the private bedchamber of George and Martha Washington. In the 18th century, doctors were working with the tools and the knowledge they had available to them at the time. The thought process was that the body had to remain in balance with its fluids: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. So all of these pastes are applied to Washington's body to create blisters so that they can open it up and that these can ooze out, so that they can remove any excess fluids to try and reduce the inflammation. Really, you're looking at chemical burns being applied to his body during all this.
Other treatments included applying dried beetles inside Washington's throat and administering an enema. But doctors also performed a gruesome procedure which involved draining Washington's blood from his body.
They were doing this system of bloodletting to try and reduce the blood and reduce the swelling in the body. George Washington was bled 4 times. That was recorded. It is estimated around 5 pints of blood was removed from him, so 40% of his total blood volume.
What made it far worse was that Washington kept insisting on being bled. And Tobias Lear, his secretary, taking notes this entire time, talks about how unnerving it was for everyone in the room to see this, to see Washington clearly fading, but begging, demanding that he be bled again. And it got to the point where the blood didn't even rush out. It sort of slowly crawled out. He hardly had anything left.
Washington begins turning white from loss of blood. He is deathly ill. He knows he doesn't have long. And then finally he takes a few more labored breaths and he dies. And it's almost as if a wail of anguish spreads out across the whole country.
George Washington's sudden and unexpected death shocked and deeply saddened the entire nation. But what was the mysterious illness that ultimately sent Washington to his deathbed? Because the truth behind his affliction is clouded by incomplete information and gruesome medical practices. We may never know exactly how and why America's first president passed away so suddenly. But according to one historical account, Washington's spirit may have lived on. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, July 2nd, 1863. 63 years after the death of George Washington, a Union Army regiment battles Confederate forces for control of a key strategic hill known as Little Round Top.
The regiment is under the command of a man named Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. He could not abandon Union positions on Little Round Top because then the Confederacy would be in a position to drive the Union off the field of battle. Everyone's wounded to some extent. They're almost out of ammunition. And because of that, he was left with no choice but to order, fix bayonets, and charge. It's one of the most memorable moments of the entire American Civil War.
In his memoirs about the Civil War, General Chamberlain wrote that as the Union soldiers prepared to launch their desperate charge, they were joined by an unlikely compatriot.
Chamberlain and other men, they would say that they saw someone wearing a tri-corner hat, the type of hat that people quit wearing around about 1800, and that man was on horseback. Chamberlain himself would even say that it was the spirit of George Washington that came back at this critical moment, this moment when the fate of the Republic was held in the balance, to encourage the men to charge the enemy rather than retreat. Chamberlain even said that they saw Confederate soldiers take shots at the man on horseback, and their bullets couldn't seem to stop George Washington. It looked like they passed right through him. And ultimately, Union forces stopped the Confederate invasion because of the divine intervention of George Washington, back from the grave, to guide the Republic and save it once again.